This is a Sports Catastrophe production. Hey there, ho there. It's Jeff Cutterdam and welcome you to another Sports Catastrophe on this day. And on this day, October the 15th, the year 1986, one of the longest postseason clinchers in baseball history happened. It's Game 6 of the 1986 World Series semifinals, or the NLCS to you and me. It's the Houston Astros and the New York Mets in the NLCS. The funny thing is that this was the first time in MLB Playoff Series history that two expansion teams would face each other, but not expansion as in first-year teams. Baseball had 16 franchises from 1901 to 1960, and then in 1961, the American League expanded to Los Angeles and Washington. Well, one Washington team, the Washington team moved to Minnesota, and then LA got the LA Angels, and then another Washington team came in 1961. In 1962, the New York Mets and the Houston Astros would get an expansion team. And those two expansion teams would actually end up facing each other. So the two quote-unquote expansion teams to meet would be Mets Astros. None of the original 8 National League teams would be in this one. The Mets were crushing it. They won 108 games. Or in math terms, they won 2 out of every 3 games, literally. This was the first time the Mets would make the playoffs since 1973. Houston picked up 96 wins. Mike Scott threw a no-hitter against the Giants, which clinched the division. And it's the first time a no-hitter has happened with a team winning the division. And the Astros, this would be the last time. The last time they went to the World Series playoffs was 1981 in that split season format. So, anyway, now, back in the 80s, the LCS would actually switch home field advantage from the Eastern winners to the Western winners. The only problem with that, even though the Mets were to have home field advantage, the only problem was the Astros would not have this Astrodome for a key game. Because the Bears and Oilers had to play at the Astrodome on October 12th, the venue would have been ineligible for the Astros to host game 3, 4, or 5, I can't remember. But as is, they decided to switch. So Shea Stadium would host games 3, 4, 5. Well, Houston would host 1, 2, 6, and 7. The Astros had a fantastic lifetime record against the Mets. Yeah, that would have been game 4. So game 1 happened. It was a 1-0 pitcher's duel, which Mike Scott outdueled Dwight Gooden. Unfortunately, this was the start of the Mets complaining that Mike Scott scuffed up the ball. And all that. Because Scott seemed to have the split ball. So a finger ball. The screw ball. It worked out. The only run was a Glenn Davis home run in the second. The Mets did have a runner on third in the top of the ninth, but Scott struck out Ray Knight to end the game. Game 2 back at the Astrodome saw Bubble Hita and Owen Ryan duel, but unfortunately for the Stros, they got their butts handed to them 5-1. As 3 runs in the 5th iced it, so Hita beat Ryan. And he went for a complete game. Game 3 back at Shea Stadium saw the Mets win 6-5. It was a back-and-forth event. Ron Darling and Bob Knepper were facing each other. The Stros had a 4-0 lead through 5.5, but the Mets put up 6 runs in the 6th. Thanks to Darryl Strawberry's 3-run home run off Bob Knepper. The Astros would score in the 7th and gave Dave Smith the ball to close the game out. In the bottom of the 9th, Wally Backman had a bunt single. And then a pass ball happened and he got to second base. Danny Heap would fly out to center field, which led to Dykstra. And then Dykstra swung a pitch over the right field wall for a 2-run home run to win the game for the Mets. A memorable postseason walk-off. Then Game 4 happened, which could have been in Houston, but because of the Oilers, couldn't happen. Mike Scott did it again. He pitched on 3 days rest and was dominant, taking down Sid Fernandez. It didn't help the Mets that they gave up 2 home runs to Alan Ashby and Dickie Vaughn. Dickie Vaughn of all people. Anyway, the Astros tied the series at 2. A pivotal Game 5 in New York. Now, there was a rainout. Yeah, so Game 5 was rained out and had to go to a noon start for the 14th because of the travel day. Because they would have to fly straight to Houston for Game 6. Anyway, it was Avengers still. Dwight Gooden and Nolan Ryan were going head-to-head. Gooden gave up 1 run in pitching 10 innings, while Ryan gave up a single run and struck out 12 in 9 innings. So it was safe to say we went to extra innings. Both teams scored in the 5th. The Astros did get the first run when Bill Doran got a RBI ground out that scored Andy Ashby. Gerald Strawberry hit a home run in the bottom of the 5th to tie it at 1. In the 12th, Wally Backman got an infield single off Charlie Kerfeld. And then Kerfeld tried to pick him off and threw it over the first baseman's head. Hal Lanier the Houston manager decided to intentionally walk Keith Hernandez to get to Gary Carter, who was struggling, went for 21. But Gary Carter showed how clutch he was by hitting a single that scored the winning run, and the Mets win 2-1. Orozco was the hero. And Game 6, today, October 15, 1986. It was a huge game. Houston actually took a 3-0 lead off of Bobby Ojeda with an RBI double by Phil Gardner, yeah, that guy, and RBI singles from Glenn Davis and Jose Cruz Sr. Bob Knepper looked like he was going to do it. And it was 3-0 through 8 innings, so Houston easily could have won this game. So it was dramatic. What was even more dramatic was that it was well known that Mike Scott was going to get the ball for Game 7, and since he had been potentially, quote-unquote, scuffing the ball and taking down the Mets, Houston looked like if they could keep this lead, they could win Game 7 because Mike Scott was on the mound. Anyway, in the top of the 9th, Lenny Dykstra would triple off of Knepper, and Mookie Wilson had an RBI single to make it 3-1, and then after an out, Keith Hernandez doubled to score Mookie Wilson 3-2. And then Dave Smith came out. Unfortunately, he would walk both Gary Carter and Darryl Strawberry. Ray Knight comes to the plate, sack fly, tie game. Although Dave Smith got down, he keeps swinging with the bases loaded. The Mets decided to use their bullpen aggressively. And the Mets knew that Mike Scott would start Game 7. Roger O'Dell pitched 5 scoreless innings. Meanwhile, Dave Smith and Larry Anderson held the Mets hitless to the 14th. In the 14th inning, Gary Carter singled, Strawberry walked, and Wally Backman singled up Aurelio Lopez to score the go-ahead run, and it looked good. The Mets could have done worse, but Mookie Wilson struck out. So now the Mets looked good. Jesse Orozco came in and threw a hanging pitch to Billy Hatcher, who swung it, and it went to left field and foul. 2 pitches later, Hatcher got his revenge, hitting it to left field and hitting the foul ball. So Billy Hatcher had just tied the game in the 14th inning. Meanwhile, it was huge. And then in the top of the 16th, Darryl Strawberry doubled off Lopez. Then Ray Knight scored a single. Jeff Calhoun came in and couldn't believe his luck. He threw 2 wild pitches, one of them scoring Ray Knight. And then Dykstra with an RBI single made 7-4. So it looked like the Mets were going to win this thing. Yeah, 7-4 in the 16th. Not so fast. Davey Lopes, the legendary Dodgers and Astro, drew a pinch hit walk. Bill Doran singled. And then Hatcher got a base hit to make it 7-5. Danny Walling did hit into a fielder's choice, but Glenn Davis hit a single to make it 7-6. So the Astros were making another comeback. Walling was in scoring position. Orozco had a full count to Kevin Bass, and somehow he whiffed him. Orozco saves the day, and the Mets are going to the 1986 World Series with that 7-6 win. Thankfully, they didn't have to deal with Mike Scott. Orozco got the win And that was the first time, and I think the only time, a reliever has won 3 games within one postseason series. Can you believe it? The time was 4 hours 42 minutes, and the 16 innings were the longest postseason contest until the Astros and Braves met in 2005 in the playoffs, and that went 18 innings. Now, this was actually the last time the Astros would wear their what they call their tequila sunrise, or as some fans call it, the Rainbow Guts uniform top. It was iconic. The Astros actually demoted the sunrise top to alternate status and would have the white version of the road top with just a simple star. Mike Scott was named the series MVP. The only problem was he was part of the losing team and all that. But the bullpen for Houston was why they sucked, and the bullpen for the Mets was why they were doing good. All that. Here's the funny thing: the Astros were tied or leading in 55 of the 64 innings in this series, and the Mets struck out 57 times and had the lowest team batting average of any league championship series winner at 189. They batted 189 and they still did it. The Astros wouldn't let it down. They just couldn't believe it. 1980, they also had a tough series against the Phillies. Anyway, it was actually named the 6th best playoff series in MLB history in 2011, but who knows what happened 10 years later. Anyway, of course, the Mets players figured Mike Scott was scuffing the ball. But for some strange reason, Scott faltered a little bit. So that. However, Mike Scott did admit he doctored the baseball during that season. But I guess because it's well found out, he couldn't do it. The Astros would do okay, but not that well. Houston would lose Nolan Ryan to a contract dispute, which some signed with Texas. Although Ryan did return to the Astros in 2014 as an executive advisor for 5 years and won a World Series ring, in a sense, for the 2017 squad. The Mets would go on to win the World Series in that famous 86 series, Buckner's ball through the legs. So, yeah, it was a good series, the 86 series was. And especially Game 6 being the most innings pitched in a postseason clincher. Believe it. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond again.